Oh, hello, Africa. Good morning, rise and shine, and welcome to Breakfast Central today, Thursday, the 28th day of October, 2021. My name is Olisa Chukwumah.
And I am Oluchi Enobong. Welcome to the program this morning. Now, we're here to bring you our midweek edition on the program. And today also, we'll be taking a trip down memory lane as we commemorate the events that occurred during the NSAS protest in Lagos, Nigeria, exactly a year ago.
And on that note, let's get started with the headlines for today. All about NSAS, remembering October 20, 2020 last year.
Still on NSAS, judicial panel inconclusive in most states in Nigeria.
Also, an update, UN update, their impact on sanctions in Zimbabwe. We'll tell you all about it.
Plus, a Zambia update where the Democratic Party expels Harry Kalaba from the party.
And a look at the newspapers from different parts of Africa right here on Breakfast Central today. You don't want to miss it. And you're watching Breakfast Central on News. Thank you very much for joining us. So we'll begin the program with a look at the papers today, Wednesday, the 20th day of October 2021, starting in Nigeria, obviously, with the Punch. Lots to look forward to.
Yeah, a lot to look forward to. And the very first one that is hitting our faces is all about the NSAS anniversary. Now, police occupy Lekki toll gate. Others, activists, set for protest. That's on page 3 of the Punch. Now, protesters, security agents may clash as youths insist on commemorative rally. That's what it says here, but you can go to page 3 of the Punch this morning. Now, you can see this picture here. That's the part of the picture. One is Ilorin, the other one's Lagos, and another also in Lagos. Now, that's the governor of Kwara State in Ilorin and Muslim faithfuls in Agege, Lagos, during the commemoration of the prophets. And this was just yesterday for the public holiday that happened yesterday as well. Now, also at the upper part of the Punch, 264 million Nigerians, I beg your pardon, others undernourished, says IMF on page 17 of the Punch this morning. Also for pages 4 and 5, collapsed building kills Lagos residents, 15 rescued, structure pulled down. There's more on that from the Punch this morning.
And we can go to Tanzania with the Citizen this morning to see what they have. So it talks about fresh concern over lecturer shortage. It says meeting that brought together the government, university vice chancellors and key stakeholders told that the problem remains unresolved despite numerous appeals. So fresh concerns in terms of lecturer shortage in Tanzania. Find out more on that story. Also on the front page from yesterday's Muslim celebrations, it says Muslims in Tanzania and across the globe mark Eid Maulid. And at the bottom there, interesting one, you have to say, French minister unveils electric cars in Tanzania. Find out more inside page 2 of the Citizen in Tanzania.
And we move to Zimbabwe. We're looking at Newsday newspaper in Zimbabwe. And you can see this picture here. That is a vehicle with a bullet passing through the vehicle. Chamisa survives assassination attempt. Now, the MDC Alliance, yesterday, they came out to say their leader was intercepted, I beg your pardon, by heavily suspected armed ZANU-PF youths who fired gunshots. Well, there's more details of that. You can see that picture there. It's not an exciting or a happy story to read this morning, but you can go to pages 4 and 5 and page 2 of Newsday. Also, it says here, don't blame sanctions. ED is coming out to tell the president. There's more on that from page 2 of Newsday this morning.
All right, and we can go to the Sowetan in South Africa to wrap up the newspapers for you. And big headline there says, it can't be normal that people are dying like this, as communities of Mamelodi decry seeming indifference of police and the government as bodies of young men pile up murdered in the city. By that more, that's in page 6 and 7. Interesting one and really sad. And lots of people dying, especially young men. And they're saying that it's not normal. MEC to spell out taxi violation plan, more on that on page 2. And a big story in the world of sports there, all about Micho Sredojevic. He's the current coach of Uganda, but he was found guilty yesterday of sexual assault in the South African High Court and has been given a sentence of 2 years suspended. So find out all about it on page 3 and what he did. All that's it on the front page of the Sowetan in South Africa.
Now, moving away from the papers, let's bring you our top stories for today.
Well, you're still watching Breakfast Central. We're starting with the top story today. Now, exactly a year today, what started out as peaceful protests against police brutality sometime in October 2020 was later hijacked by violent plot twist, which followed shootings at the Lekki toll gate.
The resulting incidents led to loss of lives and vandalization of properties, which put an abrupt end to the protests.
Now, while the protests might have come to an end, the events of October 20th last year still have many unresolved concerns, with many people demanding for justice.
We have today on the show journalist Najite Aterene, who monitored and was reporting the events during the protest at the Lekki toll gate. Good morning, Najite. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Talking about the situation that happened barely 365 days ago, you were covering the protest from the onset. At what point would you say the protest gained momentum?
I would say the protest gained momentum at day 2, day 3, 4, 5. On the 14th of October was when the hoodlums hijacked the protest, and there was a twist to it. But it really gained momentum on the day 2.
All right, Najite, morning to you once again. Now, today marks 1 year since the Lekki toll gate incident which happened on October 20th last year. Well, what memories do you still have of that fateful day?
So many memories. I mean, I started from Ikeja, where it all started, at the police headquarters, Ikeja, and where Rinola and some other young youth were out there, protesting and saying that they were not going to leave that day. They were going to stay for 3 days until the police comes out and, receive their petition. And then we moved on to Lekki, where Fowles, Runtown, and some other celebrities joined in the protest. From Lekki, moved it to the Zone 2 area command at Onikon, and then later moved it to the State House in Marina. It's so much memory. Speaking of the Lekki protest, especially, where a lot of people just joined in and they were having fun, as well as, demanding for five major things that they wanted the government to do. One, they wanted the government to change the way the police were paid. They wanted, to increase they wanted the police salaries to be increased. They wanted the police to stop extrajudicial killing and all of that. So that was a moment where Nigerian youth stood up for what they wanted, and a lot of people joined in unison.
Right. Now, Najite, as a journalist, what motivated you to cover this historic event, which eventually led to chaos across different states in Nigeria?
First of all, I'm a crime journalist, and it is my duty to bring to light what happens in the space of crime. And what actually motivated me is the fact that, one, I'm Nigerian, and I'm also a youth who also have in the past heard stories of how police has, harassed and assault some young youth just because of their hair, or maybe because they have some expensive phone with them, or they drive expensive car. Not to forget that on the 3rd of October, before the protests all started, there was a viral video where a boy was actually assaulted in Delta State, Ugeli to be precise. And then in the same week, October the 8th, another person was killed by the police in Port Harcourt, a young musician who goes by the name Slick. That was what also sparked the protest, that sparked youth to come out and, air their grievances. So for me, first of all, I am a youth. I covered the crime beats, and it was emotional for me to see that, our youth are finally standing up and, demanding for the rights that they deserve.
Najita, you also follow the proceedings when it comes to the panel of inquiry, which will come to that in just a moment from now. But the media itself as a whole was at the forefront of sharing and capturing the events. However, freedom of speech was questioned by authorities when the shooting took place. But let's take a look at this package before we have any further comments on this.
Hands Some police officers in Mufti just accosted us. The next thing was Slaus. What are you doing? You're recording us. So from 8 o'clock to 12, I saw hell. I was beaten. We were beaten. Beaten is an understatement. I read Psalm 91. I lost count. Despite telling them we were journalists, they seized our ID cards, our cameras, and just name it.
Till date, many journalists who featured during the NSAS protest prefer to be in the shadow, not for lack of information about the incident, but for fear of the adverse action that might ensue. Currently, Nigeria is ranked 120 on the World Press Freedom Index, a drop of 5 spots from its ranking in 2020. Reporters Without Borders describes Nigeria as one of West Africa's most dangerous and difficult countries for journalists. Taking a cue from media experiences during the protest, how can the status change?
I was working, I'm a woman and I was white, so they could see us from far and they were shouting like, who are you? And we would say like, we are press. And, you know, I'm not saying it was easy all the time because some of the military were really aggressive and rude and so on, but it's part of the job how to, you know, to deal with that. And we've learned that.
The media professionals, the media community, the civil society community, and in fact, all the general public should actually engage in active advocacy for enthronement and protection of media freedom. You see, because the truth is, until the media is free, we cannot be free.
Media outlets in Nigeria were attacked and vandalized during the protest, just as 3 independent broadcast stations got sanctions by the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission, NBC.
Our broadcasters have shown gross lack of professionalism and a disposition to be escalators of conflict. The Commission has therefore sanctioned stations who were found culpable and liable for infractions regarding these provisions of the code.
With the media being at the receiving end of both actions, what are the lessons and the way forward?
There's no way a media organization in the reporting of a crisis will satisfy everybody. It's not possible. We need to talk about the state of the media itself, the need for the media to be much more, resourced. For journalists going to cover conflicts to be provided with the appropriate equipment. We're in the age of technology, and I think technology makes it possible, or should make it possible, for journalists to cover protests from safe distances, from safe, places. You need a vibrant, a free, and a very conflict-sensitive media during crisis situations.
Journalists and media workers shine a light on local, national, and global challenges and also tell the stories that need to be told. It was high time the laws that protect independent journalism, freedom of expression, as well as the rights to information be adopted, implemented, and enforced. Need Omoni, News Central.
Well, you're still watching Breakfast Central on News Central with Oluchi and Olisa. Yes, it's all about NSAS commemorating what happened last year. And well, the protest, as we saw it in October 2020 last year. And we still have Najita Tirona with us. Najita, you just watched that, a journalist yourself, you just watched that package. And you covered not just the protest itself, but also the panel of inquiry that followed on the aftermath. Judging by press freedom standards in the country and the access that you've gotten or perhaps didn't get in covering the protests and post-protests, including the panel of inquiry, would you say you've suffered any restrictions so far, and has it improved in terms of press freedom and reporting?
If we talk about restriction, it wasn't so restrictive at the panel. The only time I remember where there was restriction was when there were lots of petitioners that was supposed to be attended to at the panel, and we got to the panel and saw where press should be at, which for me I feel is fair. But speaking about restriction, the panel never really restricted journalists to cover the proceedings.
Right, Najite. I mean, in retrospect, what can you say about the Lekki Tollgate shootings, and why did we have conflicting reports in terms of number of casualties, in terms of people that were that survived it, especially concerning the ugly incident that happened?
Well, the panel has to send their report to Lagos State government, who will actually give the final decision on what happened at the Lekki Tollgate on the 20th of October 2020. For now, we are not sure the number of casualties. We don't know the number of people who have died, but we have seen victims come to the panel, you know, to want to testify that they saw dead bodies on that night. I spoke with one of the victims, somebody who was actually at the Lekki Tollgate on the 9th of October 2020, and she told me that she had carried dead bodies when the soldiers arrived that night. We don't know how many, but there was a point where the panel moved to the site, the scene, where we saw bullet shells, you know, as evidence that the army actually fired shots on the night of 20th October 2020. But for now, we can't give a number to that. So many, you know, conflicting reports has come out from the forensic experts that the Lagos State government employed to investigate the matter, and we hear that there was no live bullet shot. And, you know, there was also a reversal of the claim from the military that, oh, they shot bullets, but it was blank bullets that were shot. But for the numbers of people that died or numbers of people that had severe injuries, we have no number yet.
Well, Najite, thank you so much for coming on the program Breakfast Central, and keep up the good work. I'm sure there will be lots to still cover in terms of perhaps commemorations for today. And we hear there might be also some planned protests everywhere, and I'm sure you'll be busy out there also doing the good work that you do. But thanks so much for coming on the program, Najite Tirene, journalist right here in Nigeria.
Thank you so much.
Well, still all about NSAS protests a year after, and we're following proceedings right here on Breakfast Central. Now, it is Breakfast Central once again, and our focus today is on the commemoration, which the hashtag NSAS happened. This year, we don't really even have Twitter to go for it, to say. So after October 2020 shooting at Lekki Tollgate, the digital panel of inquiry was set up by the federal government across the federation to investigate these shootings. What was the main goal of the panel, and has any of them been achieved? Well, let's quickly remind you of the 5 demands made by the protesters as we saw them, which they called it 5 for 5, right, last year?
5 for 5. Now, the first one is the immediate release of arrested protesters. Then they also made demand for justice for deceased victims of police brutality and appropriate compensation for their families. And then independent judicial bodies to investigate and prosecute reported police brutality within 10 days of psychological evaluation of disbanded SAS officials before they're redeployed. Now, these are part of the demands that they made, and that this also led to the protest that we experienced this time last year, exactly 365 days.
Yeah,
well,
at some point during the protest grind, it was 5 for 5 that people were chanting.
At some point. Now, we have joining us this morning Chukwumah Osonwa, who was a member of the Anambra State Judicial Panel of Inquiry and head of research from SBM Intelligence. Good morning, Chukwumah. Welcome to the program. Now, you have been on the show before now. This is not your first time, and you highlighted your experience and all that you saw and all that you went through. Can you please take us through some of the experiences that you had? Can you share some of them with us?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. You would recall that, to start with, it was on this day, around this time, 9 a.m. to be precise, that I received logged in a hotel in Noka for my safety and the safety of some of my friends. I received a text message from the Anambra State government saying that I've been appointed to be on the Judicial Panel of Inquiry, and that the inauguration was for the same day, on the 20th of October. So my journey into the Judicial Panel of Inquiry actually started 1 year ago today. So the inauguration was done today, last year, and we had our first sitting. But you will recall the last time I was on the show that I had informed you guys that I do not see myself going back to the panel, and it wasn't long, I resigned. The reason is because of the unseriousness of the state government. Clearly, the panel was not the priority of the Anambra state government. And you will remember that it was even after we raised uproar by the 5 of us resigning from the panel, that some certain simple agitations that if the government of Anambra State had takes the life of Anambra citizens, that we are lost to start seriously. But they would have provided.
On breakfast, because we also have Effiong Ikemesit, who is the head of the research for SBM Intelligence. Ikemesit, morning to you. Welcome to Breakfast Central.
Hi, good morning. I hope my audio is good now.
Ikemesit, now tell us, what can you make out of the international community report that people were killed, and most recently it was retracted?
Well, I mean, every dispassionate and objective arbiter and investigator, rather, who has looked into the circumstances surrounding the Lekki Toll incident and, the wider playing of the EndSARS movement has come up with, has come to, a broadly similar set of conclusions. Right, we had the opportunity, my organization, right, had the opportunity to support some of these investigations, right, especially around the Lekki Toll incident, and were able to speak with, eyewitnesses, people who were caught up in the process, right, of police, military gunfire, people who, in the aftermath of the incident after the toll gate was cleared out, right, the following morning, the morning of the 21st. Right, were victims of mop-up operations at the hands of the security authorities, right? And so the facts clearly speak for themselves, right? The government, and especially the military and the police services, have obfuscated in terms of how they are about what they are retelling, right, of the incidents of the night of the 20th, right, has been. We saw with the Lagos State Panel of Inquiry how the accounts of the army differed from that, of the police differed from that, the official statement that was initially issued by the state government, and all of that really just speaks to one thing. There are the facts, and there are how people make sense of them, right? And so those international reports, as well as some of the reporting that has been done by organizations like yours, right, and other Nigerian media organizations, right, have been able to tell a more accurate and a more objective, right, record of of what happened, right, on that particular night, today, a year ago.
All right, we hope we still have Chukwumah with us right here on Breakfast Session. But coming back to you, Ikemesit, you're the head of research for SBM Intelligence. Now, what does it really take to carry out a true investigation in a matter like this? We don't have to necessarily always have to depend on the foreign investigations from other bodies. We can do it here. Some have attempted to do it here. So where do we find ourselves in this quagmire of the night that never was?
So I don't think the problem is that investigations haven't been carried out, right? You have Nigerian media organizations, you have Nigerian civil society organizations, in fact, a coalition of Nigerian civil society organizations, right, that were involved, right, in investigating, in documenting, right, the accounts of eyewitnesses, and in trying to get a very clear sense of of what happened on the night of the 20th. I think really the issue has been, how those facts have been interpreted in the public square, right? Investigations are fairly straightforward. You simply go to, the site of the incidents and places that are connected to, to these events, and basically ask questions. You follow, you follow, forensic trails, especially with an incident, right, like the Lekki Toll incident, where there was gunfire, right, and there was some violence, right, and you try to, capture as many perspectives, including that, right, of the authorities as much you can. What you found right, over the course of the investigations, and even with the, the panels of inquiry, and I think that's the point that Chukwumah was trying to underscore, is that at the point where you're trying to secure the cooperation of the authorities in trying to understand what really happened, you've met, depending on which state, right, and which, particular agency you're trying to engage with, a brick wall, and in some cases, active obfuscation. The army and the police walked out of the Lagos State, rather infamously walked out, right, of the Lagos State panel of inquiry and said they were going to withdraw their cooperation. A couple of weeks ago, right, sometime in September, the chairman of the Lagos State panel of inquiry said, that they would in effect suspend their work because they haven't been able to secure the cooperation, right, of the authorities and witnesses whose testimony would have been material to an accurate understanding of the events of that night. Have either been intimidated, right, or for reasons best known to them, have withdrawn their cooperation. When you're operating in an atmosphere like that, it's really very hard for you to come to, a clear understanding of what has happened. But that also raises up some very important questions as to why the authorities of a sovereign state like Nigeria, having dealt with an incident of that magnitude and that scale with the Lekki Toll incident and the eyes of the world, right, were essentially on that one spot, right, in Lagos, right, in Nigeria, do not really want to know what occurred, right, on that day. You would imagine that, any properly constituted government or any properly constituted official authority would be interested in knowing why, some of its citizens were, apparently gunned down by some of its agents. But, Nigeria being Nigeria, those are the interesting state of affairs we find ourselves.
All right. Okay, now, guys, let's discuss about the panel. I mean, Delta State now is set to pay 102.4 million naira as compensations to victims of police brutality. Bayelsa State is also set to pay 21 billion naira. And Lagos State says it has paid over 83 million naira. Now, did the judicial panel of inquiries achieve its goal in all honesty? Let me start with you, Chukwumah.
That would be a hard one to answer, being that most of the judicial panels have not yet submitted their reports. Though the Anambra State is still working on finalizing their reports, and I think Rivers have submitted theirs. But we would have to wait and see what are the outcomes of these reports, to what extent were they implemented, before we could say if they actualized their goal in all honesty. But I will tell you one thing, that the judicial panels actualized from onset, which was pulling down the protest. And I said it the last time I was there. So one thing they wanted to use it for, which they achieved, was to stop people from protesting, ask them to leave the streets and form some sort of, come to the table, let's talk. Especially in my state, Anambra State. The government from day one were not actually interested in giving justice to those who have been hurt. So I would not know the answer to whether they have actualized their goal or not. So we see their report and see to what extent the government of the day implements their reports.
All right, gentlemen, let's look at those demands that once again that were made by the people around the country, particularly when it comes to the panel, what we call 5 for 5. Look at those 5 demands that were made once again. Immediate release of arrested protesters, justice for deceased victims of police brutality and appropriate compensation for their families, independent judicial bodies to investigate, prosecute reported police brutality within 10 days. Well, we're over 1 year now. And psychological evaluation of disbanded SARS officers before they are redeployed. Now, gentlemen, many will say that at least SARS was disbanded, even while the protests were still going on, even before the fateful night that for some never happened, or whatever they're reporting. But we don't have SARS anymore on the streets. Don't you think that perhaps there might be some positive on the side of the government? And I'll start with you, Chukwumah. Right now, you can't say you can't be wearing a SARS t-shirt as an officer. You don't dare do that, would you?
Yes, you would not. But we were not told what happened to these people. So we went on the streets agitating that some members, a sect of the Nigerian police force, has a certain kind of behavior that should not be in the 21st century, and you come online and say they have been disbanded, and you would recall that that this 2020 was not the first time SARS was disbanded. They have been disbanded at least 4 times over the years and all. So I think the only difference now is.
All right. Well, there you have it. 5 for 5 in terms of the demands. Disbanded staff officers, getting psychological evaluation before redeployment. Well, it's been disbanded. Have they been redeployed, or were they psychologically evaluated? Well, only time will tell. But thank you so much, Chukwumah, once again, or somewhere who is the member of the Anambra Judicial Panel of Inquiry, and to you, SBM Intelligence Head of Research. Yes.
But Olisa, I mean, before we allow this gentleman go, let's take a look at this video that we have for you.
It's found evidence that will be useful in investigating the Lekki shooting. Afterwards, they head back to Marina, appealing for peace and assuring the public of bringing the perpetrators to book.
All right, now that video was the video of the Governor Fashola, the former governor, and he was coming out to show the camera that he found at the toll gate. That was when there was an inspection post-protest. Now, a lot of people came out to say that the cameras were turned off just before that protest went bloody, while some people said it wasn't even working in the first place. But we have the 2 gentlemen in the studio right now, and this is for you, Effiong. Looking at that video, what can we say that former governor discovered that camera?
Quite honestly, I don't know that there's anything substantial to say about that. I know that particular clip was roundly criticized and mocked, right, largely on social media, but also, sort of within the wider political commentariat, because, for one, the Lekki toll gate has been in existence for at least 15 years, I think between 15 and 20 years. My recollection serves me well. We know the kind of security cameras that are installed, right, at the Lekki toll plaza. It's really state-of-the-art, right, public installation. It's not a camcorder. What looked like what the former governor inspected and saw, right, as we see it in that clip, right, looks more like a camcorder and less like a security camera, which will be installed, right, at a toll plaza of the size, right, of Lekki, and it really just highlights, right, the tokenism, right, and also the substantial lack of cooperation on the part, right, of the government authorities. I also remember, right, in the aftermath of that video, right, the former governor's remarks, he said that, the federal government was committed to, to get into the root cause, right, not just of the incident that happened on the night of the 20th, but also, right, of, sort of the wider causes that has fueled, right, the sector of police and state-sponsored brutality. And, again, Chukwumah makes, that particularly a brilliant point, right, which is that SARS, the government has made a meal about disbanding SARS a number of times, right, before last year. And if anything, the young Nigerians will say right now that, even though SARS itself, the entity, has been disbanded, right, sort of the attitudes that pervade and led to the rise of, of SARS, or the notoriety, right, of SARS, right, are still prevalent. And if anything, right, we have a situation right now where, our policing feels a lot by SARS, by other means. And so, until you really engage with the issues, you do proper investigations, right, and restorative justice, right, and, the awards by the judicial panels of inquiry, very, 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 very commendable on the part of some state panels of inquiry. But as far as I know, there has been only one prosecution of a police officer, right, for, incidents that dealt with the abuse of his power in the entire country a year after EndSARS. I think that we can do better on that particular, account, right? And until, we begin to engage on the issue, it's very, very hard for us to say a year out from EndSARS that we've been able to make real and substantial progress.
Right. I mean, Effiong, that video we saw of the Minister of Housing, Babatunde Fashola, discovering a camcorder, as it were, from the investigation they were doing after the protest went bloody on the 20th of October 2020. But now, to give us a holistic picture, I mean, Effiong, can you provide any statistics and figures to quantify the extent of physical damage from the violence that erupted during the protest?
So I know that quite a number of organizations came out and talked about the fact that the Lagos state economy, we're in Lagos, organizations in Lagos, the Lekki 2 incident happened in Lagos, the vast majority of the protests, right, occurred in Lagos as well as in, other parts of the South. I think the economic disruption was put, right, in the tens of billions of naira. A particularly key point, right, that I would like to note though, and this is something that SBM started tracking, right, in the wake of NSAS, was in the number of deaths involving, police and security officers, right? So we've been tracking that on a quarter by quarter basis. For the last quarter, Q3 2021, we're just at the start of Q4 now, right? Something on the order of a little over 3,000 Nigerians, right, were killed or injured, right, in operations or in activities involving not just police officers, but also, the military and other security agencies. A fair proportion of that, right, on average, about 25 to 30% of those fatalities have been police officers or military officers. And that's especially been true in the Southeast and in the South-South geopolitical zones. And so the entire issue around fixing policing, around making policing work for Nigerians, is not only something, right, for which, the police, right, everyday Nigerians will benefit from, but it's also something that the police officers and the authorities really need to start looking at, because if anything, they're as much a victim of their own medicine as ordinary Nigerians are. And so when you look at the data, you would think that there's a use case for the government to actually look into this, not only in order to protect us, but also to protect its own, officers.
All right. Thank you so much, Chukwumah Osonwa, member of the Anambra State Panel of Inquiry, and Ikemesit Effiong, who is the head of research for SBM Intelligence. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the program. All right, then we'll go on a little quick break, a quick breather. When we come back, more on the program.
All right, time now for some Africa reports, but still right here on Breakfast Central on News Central. So many unanswered questions from NSAS protests, where we keep an eye on what is happening today. Nigerians commemorate the 20th day of October at the Lekki shootings. But let's move now to Zimbabwe with an update on the United Nations story. Now, United Nations Special Rapporteur, that's Elena Duhan, has arrived in the country on a 10-day visit to assess the impact of sanctions as routine, and adding that the visit may not change the status.
Now, during his visit, Duhan is expected to meet government, opposition political parties, and civic society organizations to hear their views on the impact of sanctions that the ruling ZANU-PF party says are affecting citizens.
Now, the visit will come up with a report on the findings that will be presented to the United Nations Human Rights Council at its 51st session to be held on September next year. So that will be the big one between the ZANU-PF political party to look forward to in the country. There'll be more to follow on that with the updates on the impact on the sanctions in the country. And
we'll expect the guests to join us on this particular topic, but we move from here to Zambia, where we know that sanctions and the situation happening within one political party and another. Now, the Democratic Party, that's the DP founding members, have, through their lawyers, LM Chambers, expelled their party president, Harry Kalaba.
Now, the party's vice president, Judith Kabemba, says this decision was arrived at after concerns that Mr. Kalaba has been bringing former PF member into the party without approval from the Central Committee, accusing him of breaching the party constitution.
According to the notice of demand, the members have demanded that Mr. Kalaba ceases to parade himself as the party president. Also, the notice has further restricted Mr. Kalaba from entering the DP secretariat.
Now, we're now joined by our Zambian correspondent, Lydia Makina, to tell us more about the situation. Well, good morning, Lydia. How are Zambians reacting to the crisis, rocking the country's third largest political party?
It has come as a shock because we didn't see this coming, and as well as the division has come too early, knowing that they were just pulling up to be, somewhere, because this is the third largest political party in Zambia. And then we also saw that the president, the political president, who is Mr. Hari Kalaba, he was doing his best to make sure that his party was doing well. Now, coming to this, Zambian reaction as of now is that they are very surprised to see this coming, and that it isn't something that they saw coming too early, as well as they're trying to see what was the fault for it, and why is it that among themselves, because we see that in this political party itself, there are few committee members that are in, and then the few that are in, they're also bringing division among themselves, involving other political parties to say that behind this scene is this. But it's just, it has come as a shock in January for Zambians, so to say.
Right, Lydia. Now, this was a minister who resigned in 2018 before moving from the previous party to, before moving from the Patriotic Front to the Democratic Party. Now, will the Democratic Party survive this division?
If they have the good strategy, they will survive. But knowing that people knew a Democratic Party through Hari Kalaba, even though they have said that he was not a registered member, instead he was just being sponsored to start as a political party, a president during the general election, as well as but he was not a registered member. But it is something that they should know, to say that people were aware about this political party because of Hari Kalaba, and knowing that his lifestyle as well as his reputation, has a good reputation, so to say, we must say that. And he also brought in good ideas among the party, speaking from what people are saying. But seeing the division among them, seeing him coming out, and seeing that they do not want to do anything to do with him, and we don't know if there'll be the party will go further or there'll be something else. But we are here to see. We're here to see what is going to happen.
Well, Lydia, what are Mr. Kalaba's comments, as well as the comments from the Patriotic Front Party, as they have been called out on this matter? What are they saying now?
Today I had actually called Mr. Kalaba to know what is his reaction concerning this. And he said that we should forget about people that are being sponsored, meaning his the vice president to the party with Judith, that we should forget about her and the colleague, that they're just being used, or they're being used for something. So for him, he's saying we should forget about what they had said yesterday. And actually, when I called him, was saying he was on his way going to a party secretariat. So to say that for him, it's not something that has shocked him, or he's not moved with what they did. Instead, he still called himself to be a political party president. And from the Patriotic Front, these are the people that are quick to respond in anything that comes to them. But surprisingly, we haven't heard anything from them yet, but definitely we'll hear something, and I'll definitely deliver whatever will happen. But for now, they haven't said anything.
Hey.
All right, thank you so much, our correspondent out there in Zambia, Lydia Makina, for giving us the latest when it's happening in the country.
Thank you.
All right, let's go straight to Zimbabwe, and this time it's all about the ZANU-PF political party, and we have Commissioner Mr. Dr. Gomo on the program. Dr. Gomo, good morning. Welcome to Breakfast Central.
Good morning to you. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, Doctor. Now, what does this visit mean for the ruling party, the ZANU-PF, and Zimbabwe as a whole?
Oh, well, you know that Zimbabwe has been on sanctions for over 2 decades now. I'm not too sure, obviously, whether this offers great prospects for the country. But when you look at it against the fact that the ruling party is very much open to talk to anybody, anytime, about anything on this country, I think it starts the process of re-examining exactly whether the so-called international community is genuine and sincere in its intention to mend relations with Zimbabwe, given that the sanctions were never justified right from the word go.
All right, Dr. Gomez. But what are your expectations, and what do you think this visit will achieve, at least in the short term?
Well, essentially, I think what it does is to open dialogue. You know very well that our president is a very, very open man. His policy of engage and re-engagement will play a very important part in this particular aspect. In other words, Zimbabwe is open to talk to anyone from any quota. So it starts the process of serious engagement with the countries that impose sanctions. If in fact that is their intention, we would hope that the visiting dignitary will have an open mind and listen to the issues of Zimbabwe in a very impartial, honest, and responsible way.
So now, do you see this visit as a positive way towards lifting of sanctions in Zimbabwe?
I'm sorry I missed the first bit of your question.
Now, do you see this visit as a positive way of lifting the sanctions in Zimbabwe?
I'm not too sure I heard you correctly, but if I did, I think let's put it this way. The sanctions on Zimbabwe were never meant to exist at all. The law does not support it. The entire UN system does not support it. All international norms and standards do not support that. We would imagine that those that impose them can see very clearly that they don't work. The most they've done is obviously to disorganize this country's economy and subject a lot of people to unnecessary suffering. This suffering is not deserved by the people of Zimbabwe. So yes, I think the sooner they come to their senses and act very responsibly, as I said, and positively, the better for all of us, because Zimbabwe is very much open and willing to engage with anyone on mutual cooperation basis and not on the basis of what you call it, subjugation and manipulation.
All right, thank you so much, ZANU-PF Political Commissar Dr. Gomez, for coming on Breakfast Central this morning. Thanks for your time, sir.
Oh, thank you.
All right, Breakfast Central still continues, and we come back updates about the Lekki toll gates and what's going on right now as we speak. We'll also hear from our correspondents on the ground. Do stay with us.